Hello, my name is Colm Foster and I'm the Director of Executive Education here at the IMI. And this morning we're recording a number of videos that relate to the broad topic of emotionally intelligent leadership. There will be 5 individual videos in this series, and you can watch it as a whole sequence or you can watch it in parts as suits you. So let's kick off and talk a little bit about part 1, which is what is leadership and where does emotional intelligence fit into this whole notion of leadership. So when we talk to people about what does leadership mean to you, how does leadership land on you as a participant or as a person, as a team leader, as a coach, as a facilitator, what kind of words spring to mind? So I just want you to think for a sec as we get going. Maybe just pause the video, take out a pen and paper, and just write down some words. What comes to mind when this leadership thing gets talked about? And do you have an example of a leader, a good leader or a bad leader? Maybe it's a teacher you had or a coach or a boss, and think about the kinds of behaviors they exhibited that for you represent good leadership. And then what about the other side of that? Have you come across people who are in positions of authority, positions of power, who aren't really leaders, and you wouldn't classify them as leaders? You certainly wouldn't want to emulate their behavior when you get into that position. So just think for a sec about what leadership means to you, and then we'll get back into the swing of this video. When we talk to groups, a number of consistent themes come up. Same kinds of stuff comes up, no matter we're talking senior people, junior people, mid-level managers, it doesn't really matter the context. And the same kinds of things come up. Partly it's about vision. This vision thing seems to be really important. Do you know where you want to lead people to? And remember that human beings are motivated towards and away from. Both are important. So we try to get away from bad stuff, but we want to get towards good stuff. So much more important in challenging times. So how are we getting out of the difficult situations? And that's, you're leading people out of bad stuff. But where are you leading them to? And in what way will tomorrow be better for them than today? So leaders are able to articulate that vision, and they're able to articulate that vision in an emotionally compelling way, in a way that catches people in their guts, not just in their head. The other thing, and you'll see from the second point, leaders are able to coalesce a group, get people engaged. And when people are buying in, make sure that you remember they buy in when they feel valued. Do you make people feel valued in relation to the vision? Do they feel important? Do they feel connected in relationship with you? So good leaders are able to make you feel valued. And when you think back to who you wrote down as a good leader or a bad leader, how did they make you feel? Did they make you feel important? Did they make you feel unimportant? Did they make you feel respected? Did they make you feel disrespected? That really differentiates the good leaders from the bad leaders, how they make you feel in relationship with them. Leaders are able to create a visceral sense of a hopeful future, so much more important now than ever before. That leaders they bridge the gap between reality and hope. So it's not about a Pollyanna, everything is going to be fine, or we're in a terrible situation, but leaders are able to bridge between the two. This is the reality of the situation in which we find ourselves, but here is a hopeful future. Here is a hopeful picture, an optimistic picture of the future. Leaders are able to infuse a team with common purpose. So people don't just do the things that they're contracted to or whatever fits in your job spec or however your job is defined, but that extra piece. Leaders are able to get us to go above and beyond. And lastly, energy is so important to leadership. Leaders carry themselves with a particular type of energy. It doesn't have to be manic. We're not talking about jazz hands and people running around the place and high-fiving and clapping people on the back. But that's a certain type of leadership, and it works in some contexts, but not all. Maybe your leadership is a quiet, calm, protective, supportive leadership, and that's the energy that you exude, and that's what people get from you, and that's what people need from you, and that's absolutely fine. But great leaders are purposeful about their energy. It's not something that happens by accident. So those are the kinds of things that come up time and time again when we talk about leaders. One of the things that's really important to bear in mind is we had been living through VUCA times, difficult times, even more so now. And in those times, we need to be very, very careful who we choose to follow. Great book by Adrian Furnham called The Elephant in the Boardroom. If you get a chance to be reading some books now, that's a great one about the kind of the dark side of leadership. And what Adrian says is, when times are tough, in times of ambiguity and uncertainty, we we tend to cleave to leaders who will give us very simplistic and simple solutions, and we need to be careful about making sure that we're not, in order to get out of our uncertainty, that we're not jumping into a simplistic solution, and that we make sure we're following leaders because of their wisdom, not just their charisma, as Adrian points out. There were a couple of things happening already, and the pace of those challenges has increased, has exacerbated in the last few months and weeks, to do with the difficulties with enacting leadership in the society in which we find ourselves. Partly it's around this societal shift, this focus of individualism. It goes back to what Adrian Furman was saying, but we're beginning to see the kind of the leadership challenges collapsing down to individual conversations with individual personality, and an obsession with the personalities of leaders. I remember there was a really interesting comment on one of the TV shows at the election, when a guy was interviewed and he said, well, I had a choice. I could have voted for Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael or Mary Lou. And remember that Mary Louification of Irish politics? Not a comment on Mary Lou or her leadership, but it's a comment on people associating a whole movement, the whole idea, with a person. And more we see conversations collapsing then to the person, and we have to be so careful that this cult of individuality, this cult of celebrity, doesn't take over the discourse around leadership. The other issue that we're finding in society is that people are working at their personal physical limits, even more so now. People are neglecting their nutrition. How many of us are eating as well as we should be? People are stressed. There's a lot of us stressed right now. People are sleep deprived, so not many of us get the appropriate amount of sleep. Even if you're tracking your sleep, it's just another reason to feel guilty, because your watch will tell you that you're not getting enough sleep. And they're also getting bombarded with information, bombarded with meetings, bombarded with Teams or Zoom or Hangouts or wherever it is, which means that we're working as people, as individuals, as human beings, we're working at our physical limits while making high stakes decisions. And that leads to the kind of decisions that you see this gentleman make, and there are probably several others like that. So some people are stepping up and handling situations well, and we saw particularly with Elon Musk that when you put yourself at the limit of your physical capacity, you can make less great decisions. So bringing it all down to a pithy statement, I know that's very dangerous it's danger of being simplistic rather than being simple, but bringing it all down to a pithy statement, I think it's all about your ability to get others to exercise the free choice to follow you. There's a brilliant book written by Goffey and Jones who teach it here in the IMI, and the title of the book is Why Should Anybody Be Led by You? And that's one of those moments when you read a title and go, God, I wish I'd wrote that. That is perfect. That is a fantastic question. Why would anybody exercise the free choice to follow you? Because of who you are and what you stand for and how you lead, rather than because of your position. Well, that would all be fine, and all of that challenges, societal challenges, would be easy to handle if people turned up to work looking like this, all zen and calm and at their best and fully rested and having good nutrition and hydrated and all that kind of stuff. And if we all turned up looking like we were at our best. But in a lot of workplaces, people turn up looking like this, loaded for bear, already waiting for a fight, waiting to be offended, waiting for a challenge, fighting conversations that they had last week. They're in a meeting and they're trying to get you back for something you said 2 weeks ago, or they're waiting for you to make your point so that they can make their counterpoint. So we come to meet, a lot of people come to meetings ready to fight, ready for the challenge. And oftentimes when we look around our meetings, people aren't listening, they're reloading. They're getting ready to make the point that they came into the meeting to just have the pop at you, and they're just waiting for that opportunity. So you find environments, particularly when people are stressed, that they're not coming at their best. They're not coming to bring the right intent, to bring the right purpose to the meeting. They're coming to score points, or they're coming to protect themselves, or they're coming to fight for their teams, or oftentimes with senior leaders, you're being sent into the meeting to fight on behalf of your team. And you find yourself marshaled into a position where you're having to have those contentious conversations, because that's what you've been set up to do by the people who sent you in there and are hoping that you come out saying, well, I flippin' told them so and they won't do that to us again. All of that means, folks, that organizations are very emotional places. This idea of leaving your emotions at the door, of leaving your emotions out of your decision making, of just coming in as a full-time equivalent employee, some kind of robot, absolutely is not the environment that we work in. It's an old saw, but we say we hire employees, but human beings turn up. So what we have in organizations are human beings, not employees, which means that our organizational lives, whether you're in a not-for-profit or a hospital or a school or a commercial organization, they're deeply emotional places, which is where emotional intelligence comes in. So the ability to handle all that emotional stuff, which is what emotional intelligence deals with, becomes massively more important the more we understand the emotional nature, the emotional context of organizations. Back in the 90s, Daniel Goleman wrote a book called Emotional Intelligence. A lot of people have heard about it. I think it's still the #1 best-selling business book of all time. And then he made the cover of Time magazine, so pretty famous stuff. So emotional intelligence is the theory, is the science that allows us to understand how to deal with all that emotional context that's happening in work. Now, Goleman wrote his book based on original research that was done by Peter Salvo and Jack Mayer. Peter Salvo is the gentleman on the left with a rather prodigious moustache, and Jack Mayer is on the right. They were emotional and intelligence researchers, and you can see from their definition, which back in the 90s, the original definition of emotional intelligence is the ability to monitor your own emotions, to monitor other people's emotions, to distinguish between them, to discriminate between them, and then to use that information in some way to guide your thinking and your action. So emotional intelligence, when we think about it as the pure science rather than as the behavior that it's become to be known as, but the pure science, it's a hard intelligence. It's something that there are more or less correct answers to the question. So you can be asked a question about an emotional context and you can get it right or wrong. It's not how you feel about it. It's, is this person happy or sad? There's a right and wrong answer to that. It's about the intelligent use of emotion. So reasoning with emotion and reasoning about emotion, using your emotions to facilitate cognition, using your cognition to manage emotion. So both, and the arrow points in both directions. So you can use your emotions to make your decision making more intelligent, and you can use your cognitive intelligence to manage your emotional life. Most importantly, it's the basis for developable behaviors. I mean, this would all be kind of interesting. If it couldn't be changed, then it would be a little bit kind of dispiriting. But because we can develop our emotional intelligence, because we can learn more about it, because there is a science, there is an academic grounding that we can understand, you can learn more about your emotions, you can learn more about your emotional life, you can learn more about how to manage it, and then you can optimize your ability to manage the emotional context in which you find yourself, in which you have to exercise your leadership. So there's a significant amount of research has come out about emotional intelligence in the last number of years. And some of the things that the research is telling us are emotionally intelligent people have greater empathy, so they connect with other people, more positive behaviors, particularly things like helping, organizational citizenship, just being a good corporate citizen. And we're seeing lots of that online these days, but highly emotionally intelligent people are more likely to be good corporate citizens. Less negative behaviors, so things like bullying, substance abuse, those kinds of things. There's been a lot of research that negatively correlates emotional intelligence with things like substance abuse and bullying. Better quality social relationships, kind of goes without saying. Better communication, so the ability to enhance your communication with feeling, with real meaning and feeling. Emotionally intelligent people are better able to do that. They're better able to give and receive social support. And it's been strongly linked to things like vision, things like charisma, and things like teamwork. So, what do we get from the first part of this session? Leadership has always been challenging, and is becoming even more challenging. In uncertain times, particularly in VUCA environments, and particularly in stressful times, we need to be very careful who you choose to follow and why. Organizations are deeply emotional places, whether you're in person or online. All of that emotional context is happening. So the ability to deal with that emotion is a key leadership skill. And the science of emotional intelligence is the ability to understand your own emotions, to understand the emotions of others, and to do something about that. So, I'll ask you to break now. Go and have a conversation with either online or in person, or pick up the phone, or go on Teams or Hangouts, or whatever you do. Go and have a conversation with somebody about the kind of stuff that came up. Talk about what resonated for you. Does any of this make sense? Do you agree with any of this stuff? And if you don't agree, or if you don't think this applies, even more important that you have a conversation with somebody and just wrestle with the ideas and start to get into this conversation, this dialogue among yourselves. But what is this leadership thing becoming, and where does this emotional intelligence stuff fit into that? And is it going to be of any use to me going forward? I will be back for this second part.